Hi everyone, good day. Welcome to our masterclass session. And today we are going to talk about 5 hacks to implement effective asset management in your organization. I'm Santosh Mahiban, product specialist from ManageEngine ServiceDesk Plus. I hope you guys are doing good and I hope you're all staying safe and waiting out for this difficult times to pass and then we could go back to our normal lives. Do take care of everyone, and it's really difficult for all of us during these tough times. And especially right now, I'm working from home and I'm very close by the airport. So there are chances that you might hear a huge noise. So I may go quiet until the flight lands. So that's one challenge at this point. All right, then. So, with all of this being discussed, here is the agenda on what we are going to discuss today. We've all seen the asset scanning techniques during our earlier sessions, and today we are just going to discuss them in the form of hacks, what best you could do, how you could do it, and what are the ways you could do it. So, here is the first hack that we are going to discuss about the scanning mechanisms that ServiceDesk Plus offers, and during this remote work, how are you going to set them up? All right. So what do we do first? So we have like multiple scanning techniques, out of which the first one is what we're going to discuss is the Windows domain scan. So basically what you do is that in Service Desk Plus under admin, under discovery, you have Windows agent configuration. So all you have to do is go ahead, configure the agent that is required, and make sure you provide the configurations as how the server is being configured. So with work from home, most of the organizations move their applications to a public domain. So make sure the server IP is something that is accessible outside the office network too. And while you do that, enable the option scan at system startup over here and deploy the agent. So what happens? When you enable this option, every time the user logs into their workstation, the agent is going to push the information through the public URL into Service Desk Plus. Now, if it is installed within the office premise and it's not accessible from outside the network, it's still fine. Go ahead, deploy it using this particular option enable. What happens is that whenever users connect via VPN, all right, when they connect to the office network via VPN, the agent would readily transfer the information from the client machine to the server. So that's the reason why we enforce agent for all your Windows machines, and we enforce this option scan at system startup for all your deployments. How to deploy? You have a lot of these options available. So using that, you could go ahead and deploy them. So this is for your Windows machines. So be it your virtual boxes, which has Windows operating system or servers, whatever Windows OS it is, you could go with the agent. Next is that for your non-Windows machines. So to scan your non-Windows machines, we have network scan. But before we land into the network scan, we have to understand about credential library. So what do we do with the credential library? So basically with the credential library, what we can do is that we can add credentials for the IP that I'm going to scan. Because when it comes to network scan, I am going to scan an entire network's IP or between a range. And when I want to scan it, I wanted to use different type of credentials that supports those IPs because all the IPs would not be the same. Some could be of printer variation, some could be holding a virtual box. So we don't know what it is. So it's better to choose between Telnet SSH or SNMP protocol or VM or remote control or SCCM. So you could basically choose the configurations that you wanted to define. Once done, then go to network scan. And in network scan, all you have to do is that define the range or the network and choose as much as credentials possible. All right. So basically, with the IP range that you add, you are just going to choose as much as credentials for each and every each and for the entire IP. So go ahead, start choosing, click on plus, add, then click on plus, add. So just do it like this. So each and every IP, so you give an entire network or a range, each and every IP would be scanned with all these credentials. So the success rate is more. And this way, with the scanning techniques, you can bring all your assets, your printers, routers, switches, your virtual boxes, your Linux machines, Mac machines, AIX servers, whatnot. You could scan all of them using the scanning techniques and you can register them right into ServiceDesk Plus. So what we basically do is that using the scanning techniques and using the efficiency of how the scanning technique works, we are scanning all the assets, adding them right into ServiceDesk Plus. So that is what is our first hack about the discovery techniques and how you go about doing that. Now, if at all your organization is distributed in different geographical locations, you could go ahead and configure a distributed asset scan. So basically, you could install Asset Explorer and set it as a remote probe, which would act as a very small tool. And for details of that Asset Explorer, if you already have Service Desk Plus, you are entitled to get that. You could just email us and we'll help you out with that. So when you install Asset Explorer, you could configure all these scanning techniques on the tool. So that basically scans all the devices within its range or within its network, collects the information, schedule it, and push it to Service Desk Plus. And over here, Service Desk Plus processes it, unzips all the information, and then updates it into the respective asset scanning modules. So that's the reason why you go with these scanning techniques. Do we have next? So the second hack is about how to utilize the hardware and software efficiently. Now, we have to classify, we have to make use of those asset features that we have once you classify them. And then we are going to understand about the software licensing and other features as well. So with all the scanning techniques we've just discussed, all the assets that we have scanned goes right into the asset tab, into the asset repository, and especially IT asset repository. Now, once these assets are added into the IT asset repository, what happens is that based on the type of scanning we did, it comes in as workstations, printers, routers, or switches. All right, so this is done automatically by the system, and based on the scanning and the methodology we support, if it pings an IP address, if the system detects it's a printer, it is going to fetch all the information of the printer, such as the cartridge, the paper level, and all other basic information, and it is going to update right into the printer classification in Services Plus Asset Repository. Now, if it is a workstation, all right, it's just going to scan it. It's going to understand what type of device it is. It's not only going to bring in the asset information, but all the minuscule data such as the hardware, software, the user information, all of it. It's just going to scan it and it's going to bring them all right into Service Test Plus. And by the way, if you guys are wondering why the UI is a little bit different with all these like fancy colors, here is something I really missed during the beginning of my session. Click on the question mark, go to About, and just make sure you're on the latest. All right. I could see that customers are still using version 9, 10, which are like way too old. So just make sure you are upgrading the application and you're always at the latest. All right. So coming back to our discussion over here, as I said, when we scan these assets, they are added into the corresponding classification into the respective buckets. So once these assets are added, we could literally go ahead, see what they are all about, and then this added asset information can be further extended. How can we extend them? Now, I personally have worked with a couple of our customers, and always the IT teams are secluded. They are separate either on a basement or on a corner of a building. So when I was working with this particular IT asset manager, she had a paper pad and a pen with her. So anyone who wants to loan an iPad or a tablet, they have to come, sign in on the paper, and then get the asset. So what we have done for that in Service Test Plus, we have asset loan registry. And that was possible when was at the office with remote work and when people have to get items shipped to them, but you need to mark them in the system, you could use the asset loan feature. All you have to do is just go ahead into the asset loan. You've already scanned these assets. So create a new loan and simply you just need to choose either by scanning the barcodes or search assets by the name, all right? And just choose the assets that you are going to loan. And then you could say from what date to what date you're going to loan these assets, who is the user who's going to get the loan or get the assets, and click on checkout. So basically a loan is created. Once you've done that, it's quite easy. If the user calls in and says like, can you just extend it or can you just cancel it out? So you could do all of that options over here. And when the date crosses, like you could extend it or you could email the user. You could do all of that when you create an asset loan. So that makes it a lot more easier during this work from home situation. Now, also, there is this barcode feature, which is also kind of a scanning technique that I would say certain organizations have their procurement team or the admin team that places the purchase order to receive set of assets. Now, those assets are dropped at the doorstep or at the godown, and the users have to like manually enter this asset information either by the service tag or the serial number and the name and what number of items and have them separately. Now, when the IT users are scanning the assets, there is a mismatch of data of what the procurement team entered and what was scanned. So there's this confusion. So what can we do? There are like three scanning techniques. Either you could scan the vendor's barcode, you could generate your own barcode, or you could generate barcode for already existing assets in your system. Now let's just discuss this one. ServiceDesk Plus has a mobile app which allows you to scan assets using the mobile app. All right, so right from the mobile app, you could scan the barcodes. It's quite easy, and all you have to do in the app or in the system is that. So for the system, I'm pretty sure you cannot carry a laptop and go around with the barcode scanner connected to it. But if you're looking for what type of barcode scanner you wanted to use, it's just keyboard-driven barcode scanner that you could connect to your laptop. Now, it's quite simple. Go ahead, choose the like a product. So if it's a workstation or a laptop, just choose that, choose the model, start scanning the barcodes. The barcodes would be added automatically over here. Enable this option that says mark barcode as service tag. So basically, when you scan something on a box, it's either the serial number or the service tag. And once you use the barcode scanning feature, that serial number is added into the service tag section, and the same service tag is added as a barcode, and the same barcode is added as an asset name. Now, this information is added by your admin team or whoever is receiving the boxes of assets, add them into the system. Once it's done, what happens is that when the asset goes to the IT team gives it to the asset management team, they configure the agent, they deploy all of it and put it on the network. The agent or the scanning technique is going to pick up that asset, get the scanned information, and update it right into ServiceDesk Plus. But at that time, there is already an asset with the service tag, and the service tag is the name, and the same service tag is the barcode. There's a fully scanned information which has the same service tag as well. Two assets cannot have the same service tag, so we overwrite the information, update the rest of the information, securing the barcode field alone. So this way, you could easily, so the procurement team scans the assets into the help desk, and the asset management team deploys the scanning techniques to fetch and update the asset information into ServiceDesk Plus. So this way, you could make use of the barcode scanning. All right. So what are the other ways you could utilize your assets effectively is by grouping the assets. Now, this is something I would say it has been a lot more easier. So what happens is that there are at times you have certain type of devices. Like if you remember 2, 3 years ago, there were organizations still using XP and they had challenges when there was a hack that was happening. And not just that, there were also situations where certain Intel AMD processors had some flaws. And the challenge for the organizations where is to like first isolate those devices. Now, how could you isolate? You need to have the assets scanned. Only when you scan the assets, the hardware and software information is fetched in, number one. And once you do that, then when you are when you wanted to filter out those assets individually, then you could create asset groups. The asset groups are two types. One is like a static group, and the other one is the dynamic group. So when you say a dynamic group, it's nothing but you can create asset groups based on like different conditions. Say, for instance, their RAM, the IP address, the processor, the operating system, the type of asset, whatnot. There's like a lot of these fields that you could make use of. So you could like literally choose the criteria, and there's like workstation details, asset details. There's a lot of them, and then you could choose like values, and you could create a dynamic group. When I say static groups are a little bit different. It revolves around the asset state. So basically, if the asset is expired, disposed, or anything for that matter, you could like literally choose what static values that you want. If assets that are in store or even any custom asset state, you could just go ahead and use it to group the assets. So these are like kind of options that you could utilize to efficiently use the asset management process. Now, these are hacks where people like fail to utilize it and they run behind reports. So these are like small features that you could just implement it within the product and you get a whole new level of understanding, which you could work rather than working on reports. All right. Now, what's next? Once the scanned assets are in place, what are the other ways to utilize them is by managing your software license. Now, this is something really critical. As far as I've seen, certain organizations manage the software license in one place, and the rest of them have their in their email mailboxes. Well, having them in their mailbox is going to be very tricky when it comes to audits and when it comes to compliance. These two areas always get a huge dip. Now, how can we handle this situation? Quite easy. Again, scanning techniques is the base. So when you don't scan the assets, you're not going to have your organization assets into one place. Scan them first. Once you scan them, all the software are going to be added into ServiceDesk Plus under Scan Software. Now, ServiceDesk Plus by itself would not understand if the software is something that you need to manage or if it's a prohibited software. ServiceDesk Plus would not know that. The next is that when the assets are added in, it would be in unidentified status and it would be under license because ServiceDesk is not going to allocate the license automatically. We need to inform the application what needs to be done. So here is the app. I'm just choosing it. All right. It's under licensed and unidentified, which means that ServiceDesk Plus has no clue what has to be done. So what we are doing is that we are changing a couple of values over here. What is it? So I edit the software and I try to update the software type. Now what I get over here is that I get a couple of types. So if it is open source software, I could just go with freeware, shareware, and so on. If it is a prohibited software, which means that you do not want that software in your organization, set it to prohibited. What happens is that upon consecutive scanning, if you find this particular software installed, you can send notifications to the user as well as to the admin saying that there's the software installed and they could take necessary actions accordingly. And if you have purchased the software by paying money, then you go set it to managed and click on save. As you do that, the user interface changes and there's like a lot of other options that comes into the application. So what basically happens is that you get details on like how many installations you have, how many installations are unlicensed, and who are all the users that uses these installations, and where is the license. So the license is empty. So what you do is that once you manage the software license, always remember to go ahead and add a new standard license. Basically, whatever you have in your mailbox or whatever you have in the spreadsheet, just go ahead, search for the software, set it to managed, and then add a license. License is quite simple. You guys would have known if it's a volume or an individual or a CAL license or a concurrent license. Just go ahead, choose the license type from the list over here, choose the license option, then choose the installations allowed. And you don't need to give your active date or expiration date because I'm going to talk about it in a while. So once you've given this information, just click on save. Once you've done that, this license has been added. And all you have to do is you have the software, which you just managed, you have the license that you've just added, and you have your installations listed over here. All right. So also, if you look at it, it's under licensed and it is not compliant as well. So just choose the software and click a license and just click on allocate and say like allocate based on the availability. Once you do this, the license has been allocated. Your software like your software is now compliant, which means that you made sure this particular software and its licenses have been mapped and you've set it to compliant. So here is the tip. What happens if the number increases? So basically, either you might have added them by mistake. So you could go ahead, add the other license key and the information, and you could assign it. Or if you find that, okay, we only purchased 15 and this extra software on an asset is wrong, you could go ahead and investigate it. So this way, maintaining the compliance ratio would help you to go to extreme levels on managing your software and your software license. And for this same license, we need to make sure we upgrade or we update the software license, for which we could add a license agreement right from within the product, right from within software license management. And over here, you could choose the active date and the expiration date. And also you could choose the software for which you are going to allocate the license. And finally, you could also choose who needs to be notified and what is the notification content that you wanted to send along with it. So you could literally go ahead and add them over there. And also, we have just mapped the license that we have purchased. You could choose who needs to be notified, the days, and click on save. So this way, you could like proactively get yourselves notified, and you could discuss on how you wanted to move with the particular software and its license. So we have seen how to utilize the hardware and software aspect of the scanning process and what are the tips involved in them. So the third is that about the asset life cycle. All right, we just saw how a software comes in and what are the ways we manage. Likewise, we have asset life cycle. What is it? Now, when you scan an asset or when you import assets via a spreadsheet without a user information, the asset would be marked as in store. All right. So all the assets are being added as in store. So why is it added as in store? Because basically we need to like sort and segregate it like what type of asset and what needs to be done with that. So all the assets that's coming into ServiceDesk Plus is going to be in store. All you have to do is just click on the asset. And if you wanted to assign it to a user, you set it to in use. You choose who the user is. And if it's Andrea, I'm just going to set, set her. And I'm just going to click on save. This way the asset is assigned to Andrea. Not just that, the moment you do this, it's also going to bring in the relationship right into CMDB. So that's something we're going to look into it in a very short span of time. But just so you know that the moment I assign the asset to Andrea, that relationship is automatically being mapped. So it says this asset is used by Andrea Jennings. So that is how the relationship is automatically pitched in. So this is one key element about mapping assets to users. All right. Now, this is something I did as an asset lifecycle process by changing the asset from in-store to in-use. Now, here is a tip. Now, if you have scanned assets using ServiceDesk Plus, and if you're importing users from your Active Directory, there will be a sync. So what you have to do is just choose it from the list view, click on these dots, and click on Auto Assign Workstations. So what will happen is that ServiceDesk Plus would have the asset name and who's the owner who last logged in. All right. So whoever is the last logged in, you could choose them as the suggested owner. And within a single shot, you can assign the assets to those owners. Keep in mind, all right, when you assign the assets to the owners, you need to check if the administrator name is listed more than one time or the system admin name is listed more than one time. Because basically, it's those folks that logs into the asset at the last because they wanted to deploy everything. So they were the last previous person to work on the asset. So you should not assign all those assets to them. Just make sure you you verify the information. If you want to update the owner, you could do it and then click on assign owner. That's one method. And the other way is that to assign assets to the user, it could be via spreadsheet. So you have the asset name and the product. These two are the mandatory fields. All right. So what you have to ensure is that you could just go ahead and perform an CSV import, but make sure you export the asset name, the model as how it's there in the application. Then you could go ahead, add a column, and in the column you could say who are the users who needs to have access to these, who needs to be mapped to those assets. Do a CSV import, and the users is going to be the login name of the user. So when you do the imports in such a way, what will happen is the asset will automatically be assigned to the user. The asset state would go from in store to in use. Now, We have discussed these type of asset state that is going to be actually beneficial. So, which is something you need to track as well, just to know where the assets are. Now, there is other asset state which is called as expired or disposed. So, what you have to do is that if there are assets that goes to repair, you could mark them as in repair, as you could see over here. And if the asset is like going to be disposed of, or going to be, it's like expired out of warranty, what you could do is you could like edit the asset and change it from in store to in use, in use to expired or disposed, or even from in store. Now, what does the expired or disposed does? It literally isolates the asset from the asset repository. It deallocates the licenses that you have mapped to that specific asset, so that you could reuse the asset license to some other asset that is going to replace it. And then the ServiceDesk Plus license is primarily based on the number of technician logins and the IT asset node list. So you would also save the asset from consuming your IT asset license. So these are all the scenarios, all right? These are all the scenarios where the asset lifecycle helps you big time and saves you a lot of time. Here is another tip. Go to the admin tab, all right, and go to scan settings. So in scan settings, what you would notice is that you would notice a new feature being introduced. So I go to scan settings, and over here at the scan settings, I scroll to the bottom, and over here you have this asset, you have this option that says delete or dispose workstations and servers that has not been scanned in the last 90 days or whatsoever. When you enable this option, rather than deleting it, you could just move it to expired or disposed state, so that the asset would still be there but would not consume asset license or software license. So this is a new feature that we have introduced, so you could go ahead and make use of them. Now, optimize managing your assets. So we're going to see what are all the other ways that you could optimize the assets that you have in the system. Now, I talked about mapping assets to users, all right? And I've also said that you could do a CSV import to assign assets to users. It not only like sets the assets to the users, but also it frames relationship. It moves the asset from in-store to in-use automatically. And when you import it via the user's login name, it's going to set the department, the site, all of that for that asset. All right. Now that's one thing. What's next we have over here? It's CMDB. Now, with CMDB and my experience with customers, I always tell the customers that CMDB is going to be the last integration that you would do in the Service Desk Plus. Why? If you look at the left hand side, it is going to range from like your physical information to information which you literally cannot see, such as you like the network details, the data, the firewall information. So if you need to manage all of this, you need to know what goes into your CMDB, and not just that, your users, the asset, the technician groups, the tickets, they all come into CMDB. Now, what I always tell customers is that is take a paper and pen, lay out the critical elements of your business, and start framing relationships on how they are related with each other. Now, once you have a point of understanding, then go ahead into CMDB and check all your CI types are listed over here. Now, you would have referred a CI type as rack, or it could be a blade server, or however you configured or you're calling it for. Just make sure it's there on your left-hand side. If it is not, then go to admin and just go into asset management and configuration item types. Go ahead and add them. Even your service catalog, like the categories that you create in your service catalog, that's part of your CMDB as well, because it is a service. The service is on an asset. So if you're going to upgrade an asset, you need to know what's the service it's going to impact and what are the other deviations it would take. So go to admin. You have your list of CI types. You can add a new CI type. And while you're doing that, you just need to make sure that you don't set it as a parent CI type. If you set it as a parent CI type, you need to make sure that if it is an IT asset or if it is not an IT asset. All right, when you say if it's an IT asset, or even if you say it's an asset, the information and the classification will be added right into your asset repository. So when you see track as an asset, it would ask if it's an IT asset or if it's a non-IT asset. And if you choose that, it would be treated as an asset and goes right into the bucket. If you don't choose that, it'll be considered as a CI type, an entity within CMDB alone. All right. So what's next? When you figured out that you need to add more CI types, you could do it. You could choose between app name, or you could even choose if it needs to be a parent of something else. The next is that is the relationship. Each of these CIs can have its own relationships, and the relationships would be automatically like you could map the relationships too. Now, for this CI type, you could add what relationship it holds. If not, you could add them manually as well. So say, for instance, I'm just going to take some business services, all right, and I'm just going to edit or just click on the relationship of any one of the service, all right? So I could click the tree symbol, or I can go into the service and view the relationship. I can do however I want. I now choose to go into the particular CI, and then I am going to go right into the relationships tab. So basically, what happens is that inside the relationship tab of that CI, you not only see the relationship, but it can also add more relations between different CIs. So right under the relationship tab, I could just go ahead and click on this plus and add what relationship I need to do. If I want to remove, I could go ahead and remove relationships. So this is how I go ahead and add my relationships one at a time. And while adding the relationship, whatever attributes that I've pre-configured, that would populate. And if you wanted to add more, you could always do that. Okay, so this is how we manage the CMDB and the relationships. Now, what is this number 7 that is shown on this particular service? So what we are doing over here is that we are tying CMDB with your other IT service management processes. And the 7 states that there are 7 open changes on that particular CI. So this is how you reference, you verify, and you understand how a CMDB comes into place, how the relationships are framed, and how it integrates with other IT service management modules as well. So this is how you effectively manage your CMDB in ServiceDesk Plus. Now, we also saw how CMDB works with other IT service management processes too, just by understanding their behavior. Now, here are a couple of tips again that needs to be understood to optimize your scanning process. So I go to the admin tab, all right, and right into the admin tab, I go to my scan settings. So I'm right over here and I choose my scan settings. So keep a watch over here to understand what these scan settings do. It's quite simple. If you are having a workstation, make sure you disable their MAC address for a unique identifier. Just disable it. The next is that you get this highlighted segment and you get this option, click here to view. Just go ahead and click them. Once you do that, it would show you 2 assets with the same name exists. So what you wanted to do. So it's always best to add those assets to the invalid service tag list. So you might question, you disabled MAC address, you added the asset service tag into the invalid service tag list. So how does it work? Well, if you have deployed the agent would ID would be the unique parameter. There is no way that asset could be duplicated. If it is not, all right, if the agents are not installed, then the workstation name is going to be unique and that cannot be duplicated as well. So workstation name would come into precedence. So you just need to make sure that you disable the MAC address identification and add the invalid service tags to the list. So based on the agent ID or the workstation name, the scanning works. Not just that, we discussed about how to delete or disperse workstations in just the previous slide to make sure the integration helps you to move the expired or disposed assets off. You like clean the asset repository and have only the valid ones. And there's a lot of this information. Remember, I mentioned that the agent is going to push the asset information to the service to server. Here is a delta scan that could be enabled, which means that whatever was first and what was changed in like the few minutes, that could be considered that's considered as a delta scan, and that information is pushed to the central server. So these are a couple of hacks that you should know. And then imagine if you're scanning an IP address and you wanted to exclude some of those IP addresses, you could just go ahead and add those IP addresses into the exclusion list. So upon the consecutive scanning, those assets would not be flagged. All right. So we have seen a couple of these techniques on how you could manage or optimize your assets. Now, the last one is about how to make use of the third-party integrations effectively. Now, you might be a customer of SCCM or you might be a customer of Desktop Central and you would be wondering how that works and what are the options that we get. So first things first, under admin, we have SCCM. So you could literally integrate ServiceDesk Plus with SCCM. So I go right into my admin tab, and in the admin tab, I have SCCM over here. So right under discovery, I have SCCM integration. Just go ahead, make the integrations right from the user interface. And once the scanning technique starts to flow in place, the SCCM's data would be updated right into ServiceDesk Plus. ServiceDesk Plus. So here is one way you could go ahead and integrate ServiceDesk Plus with SCCM. And not just that, ServiceDesk offers a wide range of integration possibilities between other ManageEngine products. And today we wanted to talk about ServiceDesk Plus with Desktop Central, which is a patch management solution where ServiceDesk Plus can be integrated with Desktop Central. So it's quite easy, quite straightforward. Go ahead, add these credentials right in. And once you've done that, test the connections, save them, and the integration works. So we will be able to share information between Service Desk Plus and Desktop Central via their agent. And the Desktop Central agent does a lot more of the activities. So the Desktop Central agent is also capable of scanning Linux machines, Windows machines, and whatnot. So we just need to make sure that if you already have Desktop Central, you could go ahead and integrate it with Service Desk Plus. We can work on it and make sure the integration goes smooth. So these are a couple of integrations like the SCCM and the option to scan assets using Desktop Central. So these are a couple of things that you could always keep in mind. And if you need any assistance around this, you can happily let us know, and we'll be more than happy to help you out. So here is a quick recap on what all we discussed. We discussed the scanning techniques and its mechanism and how to set it up during these work from home situation. Next is utilize scanned assets, like make use of the barcode scanning, the loan assets, the software asset management, and its life cycle. So you need to take into accountability of all these factors and make sure you have them all sorted out. Now, also, you are going to construct an effective CMDB. So it's not just going to benefit you, it's also going to benefit all the other teams who are going to refer the CMDB and get some insights on. So also, finally, we know that Services Plus now integrates with SCCM, Outlook, like Microsoft suite of products and Desktop Central. If you have any questions or if you need any assistance with the product, we do have our consultants available. So there are product experts who spend some time with you to understand your product, the setup, and we would appoint experts to help you with the implementation or any technical queries that you have to make sure you utilize the product to its fullest. So I hope you all enjoyed today's webinar. Hope you all learned a lot of information and it was very informative. So please go ahead, take part in the Gartner review, email us at hello@servicedeskplus.com for any queries, and we'll be more than happy to help you. And during this pandemic time, please do stay safe. And we all just have to work it together to get out of this particular situation in flying colors. So take care, everyone. Stay safe and bye-bye.